No, we're going to completely deconstruct the traditional myth of human supremacy today and look at how our species actually managed to survive. We've all heard the standard story, right? Humans used our massive, unparalleled brains to just invent our way out of the food chain, mastering nature and conquering the globe. But what if that entire narrative skips the absolute most crucial chapter? Today, we're going to dive into the evidence showing we didn't master nature in a vacuum, not even close. In fact, every single major evolutionary leap we made was entirely dependent on borrowing, stealing, or absorbing the traits of other animals.
All right, let's kick things off with a little hypothetical scenario, just to set the stage for how incredibly vulnerable early humans really were. I want you to picture taking away all your modern advantages. No tools, no clothes, no fire, no shelter. If you were dropped directly into the middle of the Pleistocene epoch, roughly 2 million years ago, honestly, how long do you think you'd last? To really understand human history, we first have to admit our biological reality back then.
When you compare our biology to the apex predators of the time, the contrast is absolutely stark. On one side of the equation, you've got terrifying beasts like the saber-toothed cat with its massive 6-inch canines, or the giant short-faced bear, a creature so huge and fast it could literally run down horses. And on the other side, us. Early humans. We had absolutely zero armor, no venom, our skin was paper thin, and our fingernails were completely useless for defense. We couldn't outrun a lion, and we couldn't outclimb a leopard. By every standard metric of evolutionary biology, we were essentially walking Happy Meals with zero natural defenses. And yet, somehow, this completely defenseless creature managed to conquer the entire globe. From glowing modern cities to sprawling infrastructure, the defenseless ape eventually inherited the Earth. Which brings us to the core mystery of our evolution. How in the world did a species so woefully unequipped for survival manage to outlast the monsters of the Pleistocene? Well, let's look at part 1, the caloric crisis, and the bone crushers. To solve this mystery, we've got to look inside the most expensive organ in the human body. The human brain is just an absolute metabolic monster. Think about this number for a second. Our brain accounts for just 2% of our total body weight, but it demands a staggering 20% of our daily calories. That is a huge energy tax. This creates a massive bottleneck, something scientists call the expensive tissue hypothesis. For our early ancestors, like Australopithecus, trying to fuel that growing brain on a diet of low-calorie tubers and fibrous leaves, it was an impossible mathematical problem. Digesting tough plants requires a massive gut, which leaves no extra energy to run a larger brain. You can afford a big gut or a big brain, but you absolutely cannot afford both. So, how do we pay the caloric bill? Simple. We let herbivores do the digesting for us. We bypass the plants entirely, and when apex predators abandon their kills, early humans used heavy river stones to smash open the leftover skeletons. We were hunting for bone marrow, which is essentially pure fat and lipids, literally the exact building blocks of brain tissue. By scavenging this rich marrow, Homo erectus could afford a much smaller gut, freeing up massive amounts of metabolic energy that was immediately redirected to expanding our cognitive hardware. But upgrading our cognitive hardware, that was just the beginning of the story. Sure, we had the brain power now, but a massive environmental shift was about to test our physical limits in a way that sheer intelligence alone just couldn't fix.
Which brings us to Chapter 2, the Bone and Sinew Industrial Revolution.
Okay, jump forward to roughly 70 to 100,000 years ago. Early Homo sapiens migrated out of Africa directly into the freezing grips of an ice age. Now remember, humans are a tropical species. We completely lack the thick fur of a mammoth or the dense fat layers of a walrus. In those freezing tundras, a hairless ape should have frozen to death in a matter of hours. To survive, we borrowed the adaptations of other animals, creating what was basically our very first industrial supply chain. We didn't just eat animals, we manufactured thermal suits out of them. It all started with an incredibly important yet tiny piece of technology, the bone needle. By carving a small bone needle with an eyelet and threading it with tough animal sinew, that fibrous tissue connecting muscle to bone, humans were able to stop just draping loose hides over their shoulders. Instead, we stitched form-fitting, multi-layered clothing. This trapped a microclimate of warm air directly against the skin, allowing us to inhabit the coldest corners of the globe. It's honestly incredible how we repurposed the wild. We took the very defensive traits of our prey and turned them into the tools and weapons that leveled the playing field for us. An animal's hide became our portable shelter and insulation. A stomach that transformed into a waterproof canteen for carrying water across arid steppes.
Antlers became essential leverage tools for flint knapping. And those same bones we used to extract marrow earlier, we carved them into armor-piercing projectile weapons. We were literally wrapping ourselves in the evolutionary adaptations of other species.
Moving right along to part 3, environmental hard drives and poison testers. Now, physical survival against the cold and predators is one thing, right? But as we pushed out of familiar territory and into dark, totally uncharged continents, we faced a terrifying lack of basic information. We didn't know the landscape, and we sure didn't know the botany. So we survived this massive information deficit by crowdsourcing our geographical and botanical intelligence. We used animals as environmental hard drives. Think about it. Animals spent millions of years mapping the terrain through brutal trial and error. By following the deep, compressed migration trails of heavy herbivores, humans were led directly to hidden oases and seasonal lakes in the desert. We watched which leaves monkeys avoided and which barks sick bears sought out, effectively using animals as our original poison testers, saving countless human lives from lethal botanical experimentation. We even learned to listen to the sudden silence of insects or the shrieks of birds to warn us of approaching predators. We survived by plugging into a sensory network vastly superior to our own. Let's look at Chapter 4, the First Treaty and the Sleep Revolution.
Eventually, just observing animals from a distance wasn't quite enough. Roughly 15 to 30,000 years ago, we decided to officially recruit one, and it changed the wiring of our brains forever. The domestication of the wolf is often framed as this cute story of early companionship, but in reality, it was a high-stakes military alliance. Individually, both species were effective, but look at how these traits complement each other perfectly. Humans brought incredible stamina, high intelligence, and projectile weapons that could strike from a safe distance. Wolves brought a highly sensitive olfactory system to track prey, night vision, and fast-twitch sprinting to corral targets. Together, they forged an Ice Age syndicate that completely dominated the hunting grounds.
But you know what? The ultimate gift from dogs actually happened at night. Before dogs, humans sleeping on the ground were incredibly vulnerable to nocturnal predators like leopards and hyenas, meaning our sleep was constantly fragmented and light, always keeping one eye open. But dogs brought their territorial aggression and sensitive hearing right into our camps. Serving as our biological alarm systems, they allowed humans to finally, truly drop our guard. This unlocked long, uninterrupted periods of deep REM sleep. Neurologically, REM sleep is the critical stage where the brain consolidates memories, forms complex connections, and fosters actual creativity. By outsourcing our nighttime security, dogs literally gave us the peace of mind to dream and become truly innovative.
Let's just take a step back and look at the timeline here. See how this builds a compounding narrative of survival over vast scales of time? 2 million years ago, we desperately needed marrow for brain fuel. 100,000 years ago, we needed stolen hides and sinews to survive the ice. 30,000 years ago, we domesticated wolves to secure our safety and unlock REM sleep. Every single major evolutionary leap forward relied entirely on a specific animal trait. Which leads us to Part 5, the invisible biological shield.
So as our brains grew and our survival techniques compounded, our populations naturally exploded. We shifted from nomadic hunting and gathering to settling down and building cities, which ushered in our final, invisible boss battle. The agricultural revolution provided a stable, seemingly infinite food supply, but living in dense, unventilated proximity to thousands of domesticated animals unlocked a devastating new enemy: zoonotic diseases. These are pathogens that jump from animals to humans. Measles evolved from rinderpest in cattle, influenza originated from ducks and pigs, smallpox came from a rodent or camel virus. Initially, as these early cities grew, these animal-borne plagues were catastrophic, wiping out massive percentages of the human population. But over thousands of years, a profound biological shift happened. The humans who actually survived these devastating plagues passed on their resistant genes. This forged a robust immune system, an invisible biological armor in Eurasian and North African populations who lived shoulder to shoulder with livestock. This totally counterintuitive gift from animals gave them a distinct, massive geopolitical advantage over unexposed regions, like the Americas, which had very few domesticated animals and therefore completely lacked this deep-seated zoonotic immunity. And finally, Chapter 6, the final symbiosis.
So what is the crucial takeaway from all of these historical eras? How do we synthesize this crazy journey from scavenging on the savannah to building sprawling civilizations? We have to fundamentally reframe the human journey. The myth tells us we conquered the wild, standing apart from nature as masters of our domain. But the reality is that we were fragile, naked apes who survived strictly through a masterclass in adaptation. We didn't conquer nature, we absorbed it.
We borrowed the speed, the warmth, the senses, and the immune systems of the creatures around us until we were strong enough to stand on our own. Our bodies, brains, and societies are quite literally monuments to the creatures that died so we could live.
The reality of our evolutionary past is just perfectly captured in this idea. We didn't climb to the top of the food chain by ourselves, we were carried there. At every single point where humanity should have failed, an animal bridged the gap. I'm going to leave you with this final thought to ponder as we continue to shape the future of this planet. If we remove animals from our evolutionary past, we wouldn't just be less advanced, we literally wouldn't exist. So, how should understanding that profound debt reshape our modern relationship with the animal world today? Thank you so much for exploring this with me in today's Explainer, and I really love this gives you a completely new perspective the next time you look at the natural world around us.